Hi everyone, I'm Susan Birch and welcome to another A Health Detective podcast. And today I'm talking with the lovely Doreen Downing, who is a psychologist and teaches essential speaking skills to people so that people can speak up in their life. And this is whether it's public speaking, at work, or in their relationships. So I'm really looking forward to having this chat with Doreen today. Thanks for coming along, Doreen.
Oh, Susan, it's fun to engage in conversation with you because every time we have had conversation, it seems like we discover new things together. And so that's what I think the listeners, if they follow along with us, it's like a journey. We're all going on a journey together.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Can you just give us a little bit of background about how a psychologist got into teaching people about finding their voice and speaking up and why this is just so essential for all of us?
Well, I have to admit and also confess, which I did a while ago, but I'll just say it right here, right now. I got a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, launched my practice and was quite successful, did some research. And I was asked to give a presentation at a psychology conference. And I said, oh, no, no. I'm too scared to speak in public. And pretty much the organizer put their hands on their hips and said, what? You of all people? So that sense of being exposed for something that I've been pretty well able to hide, because in my office, it was only one person at a time. Usually I'm quite comfortable listening and being with people, but put me in front of even 6 people, my heart would start racing and it felt like my head was going to break open because my heart was pounding so loud. So that was a struggle that I was able to hide most of my life until somebody said, hey, you.
I think so many of us feel that way. What what drives that fear? Why are we so scared, when we stand up and speak? I do my podcast now, and I was so nervous in the beginning. I used to be so petrified, and now I'm a lot more relaxed. But I go to our local Toastmasters, and there's only about 8 of us. We're all absolutely good friends. And I stand up, and my heart is pounding, and I'm so self-conscious. Yeah, what's that all about?
Well, I would say that there are levels of explanations. There is, if we want to, I'll just start with the deepest right now because I'm a psychologist, is that when we are born into this world, we have certain gifts and we have certain, but we always have a voice, don't we? Hello, goo goo, baba, and the world around us, usually it's parents, but some kind of caregivers usually welcome us. And that in developing a sense of ourselves as being and as being listened to, that's one way we begin to discover we have a voice. We can express ourselves and be heard and have our needs met. And that's a very, very early developmental process that happens. And I think that nowadays there's so many coaching programs out there, just feel the fear and do it anyway, or keep going forward, you can. And I think all those programs are fine. In fact, Toastmasters is one of them, and they help people. But I think that really, if we're going to look back on an explanation from a psychological point of view, it's an early developmental process to feel like you're here in the world and people are glad you're here. And that to me is confidence right there. And the little one gets to grow from that. And yeah, maybe there's some challenges and some breakdowns later on. And for sure, sometimes the wounding happens later on. I'm not saying that if somebody could be totally confident early on and then move out and, hey, it's solved for life. No, I know that. So I would start with that first. And I have lots of other things I could say about it as we go forward. But I would want people to say, wow, it's an we we develop our sense of selves in the first few years of life, and that's what we carry forward. And if it's been damaged, sometimes because we have to grow up and get the grades and get out in the world, we
Mm.
bury that.
Mm.
And it's hidden. And I would say I hid my fear until I was in my 40s.
Mm. Mm. That's that's so interesting because those early years can have such an impact. I'm just thinking, if you're told to be quiet, or you're too loud, or you're too shining your light too brightly, and you can be told, we don't do that. New Zealand culture, especially when I grew up, was very much in that mindset, and I think we were discouraged from really showing and developing our personalities in that way.
Yes, I think families have some kind of culture, but then the wider culture, different kinds of societies treat children and in a certain way, like they're to be seen and not heard, or the elders are the ones with all the power and authority, and you're not going to get there and go sit in a corner. I don't know. It just feels like what we're talking about as we're starting to explore the early roots of anxiety, of speaking up in public. I think you named a lot of it, is that what messages we hear: shut up, be quiet, you don't matter, those kinds of things. If we hear them really early on, you could tell that that's our esteem, our self-esteem is wounded early on.
Mm. So why is it so important that we can speak up, and, not just at Toastmasters or in a meeting at work, but with each other, being able to, communicate at a deeper level, like you and I can have conversations at a deeper level and express ourselves. Why is that so important?
Well, I think a, a couple of things. I just want to mention something about Toastmasters and the whole difference between being a person, a human being who has a voice and can speak up in any situation, no matter what, not just blast themselves out and take charge, but just, have an opinion and feel like they're confident and comfortable to express it, which is different than being a presenter and a performer. And I think Toastmasters sometimes kind of tends more towards training people to be public speakers. And my work is more about helping people just be comfortable speaking, no matter what the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, especially because of your field in health, and it seems like that we find ourselves later on in life in situations where my goodness, we do need to speak up, maybe speak up to a doctor, or speak up to people who are saying, oh, it's nothing, headache. My girlfriend is in the hospital right now with a headache, and it turns out she's got a carotid artery dissection. And people are just saying, oh, take some aspirin. And so it's like, how do we learn to listen to our own, what's happening to ourselves in a health, and say, I've got to do something here, and then go do it.
Mm. And, I think sometimes the way we talk to ourselves, so, we're talking about
Yes.
speaking up to
Yeah.
others, but the way we talk to ourselves as well. And that's, excuse me, that's something that I really come across with my clients so often, is they have this goal and this big vision that they really want to make some changes and improve their health, but they're kind of stuck in a spiral of how they think about their ability to do that, the kind of language that they use with themselves, and then sometimes an inability to speak up to their family and their friends and their partners and coherently say, I want to make some changes, and be respected and be acknowledged and be supported for those changes. You know, you were talking about hiding, you know, your fear of public speaking. And I think a lot of people are hiding their fear of wanting to take care, you know, without hiding that they want to take care of themselves out of fear from, you know, the external environment.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is somebody has a condition or a situation, let's just say weight, and they want to make a change, but maybe they're in an environment where other people don't even care, like they don't make healthy choices or something like that. And so here's the person trying to bring in better choices, and everybody around them is kind of, well, maybe teasing, or maybe not as bad as shaming, but, you know, in some way making it really hard to listen to your own intuitive sense of about what makes yourself healthy.
Yeah, I think that is quite a big part of it for a lot of people. And, you know, I have a number of clients who have a lot going on at home with their children and their spouses and work. And, you know, the current environment is pretty terrible. You know, worldwide with COVID, it's been, you know, it's been a very difficult time, and New Zealand has had a particularly difficult time, and now we're going into a recession. And I think a lot of women feel, and men too, actually, because I get this from men as well, they feel the need in here, but they are just so used to being the martyr, not being heard. You know, I mean, I know I was always the, you know, the martyr. I think we can kind of enjoy that role sometimes. It's a good excuse sometimes.
Yeah, I liked what you just did. You put your hand on your heart when you were saying about you know, a woman who is wanting to take care of herself, and putting your hand on your heart felt like it was what we need to do, is embrace our own self like that, and with kindness and gentleness, and the being in an environment where there's so many demands. I mean, you know, a lot of women do full-time work and child care and relationship, and oh my goodness, how do you make changes? How does somebody make changes in such a way that it actually, in some ways, is like a problem that needs to be solved, that's all. But in other ways, they have to feel that it is possible. And I liked what you said about that too, about, well, what is possible here? And living in possibility is one of my things. One of the things I you know, I love the whole idea of entering a moment and discovering, well, what else is possible here? And another way to say it is, where there is a will, there is a way. There's always a way. There's always a way. And I think this deeper listening, where it feels like we've just kind of dropped down into, is the intuitive listening. You know, listening to the intuitive voice that says, take care of yourself. You know, it could be a whisper, but can you hear your own whispering?
I really love that. I love that possibilities, you know, that just makes your heart sort of grow bigger, or, you know, you just feel this sort of warmth and this engagement with that word possibilities. And it takes away that sense of struggle about it all, you know, that we're kind of in conflict all the time.
Yes. Yeah, the conflict is always there, isn't it, though? And it feels like, I like the sense of being able to drop down into my state of beingness, because I know we're talking about health, and to me, being able to have a deep inner, I call it the essence, and that's why my programs are called Essential Speaking, speaking from the essence of who you are, so that in some of the situations you and I have already pointed to, it feels like if you are connected to the essence of who you are, your voice is there. And no matter what the challenge or the conflict, it feels like expression is more possible when it comes from this true inner strength of your essence, your being.
Because I think sometimes, I know for me, there are or have been people in my life at times where, I feel that I'm trying really hard to express that inner essence of myself. I feel like I'm trying to say, these are my needs. Not necessarily ask them to meet my needs, but ask them to respect my needs. But you don't feel listened to, and it's really hard to know whether the communication problem is from me not being clear enough, not being clear about my intentions, or whether somewhere we're not connecting properly on a higher level with the person who we're talking with.
Where I go with that, Susan, is as long as we're here talking, where I go with that is first, you have to be able to drop down there so you know that this is your truth. And I just, even my voice went down a little bit right now as I was speaking, because I'm feeling more about what that takes to speak from a deeper, it's like a resonance. And when you speak from a deeper place inside of you energetically, I think okay, we're getting a little spooky here, but the vibrations of that energy inside of you can reach people more. And it's just my sense of how to have yourself be heard more is being able to be slow and deliberate and down deep in your core, so that it's like like when you ring a bell and the bell keeps vibrating. And then if you've communicated yourself and the person is not a good listener, then you go, okay, that person's not a good listener. I don't know. If you can take the next step, it's like, oh, I just said something and it feels like you didn't really hear it. And so then you make a comment, you're in the here and the now more, and you're not blaming, you're just observing. And this is what I notice. And if they get defensive, it just depends on the relationship, because then you go, well, I see you're getting defensive, and then you're in a conflict situation. But I'm just thinking about, since people are listening and want to be able to express, or, first go down, find the sense of being connected to their truth, and then being able to go through the fears of being able to speak up about it. And then it's you can see it's every level has a whole learning, how to find your voice, how to go through the fear of expressing it, then expressing it, and then dealing with the response to the expressing of it.
Yeah. Really fascinating. And it just reminds me so often of conversations I have where, you might start off with these beautiful intentions and you go inside yourself and you're thinking, okay, what's the outcome I want from this conversation? And you have all these like lovely dreamy goals about how it's all going to go. And then the other person doesn't play the game, and you end up coming out of that space, and then you go into conflict, and it's like, well, you never listened to me anyway, and you're on a really different level again.
Right. Yeah. The yeah, age old, want to be heard and not being heard. And then there's the reaction to not being heard. And then two people are in reaction, and then, whoa, time out. And
Yeah.
if it's a relationship where there is some agreement about that, like with our partners, is to have set up beforehand some kind of ability to say, when we get that far into it, we need to have a signal so that we know that that's not going to be the road to solution.
Mm.
And we need to, so it becomes a collaborative kind of, wow, we're there again, aren't we? A joint kind of thing.
Mm. I really like that collaborative idea of you have set up early on when we get to this point in a discussion or debate or argument, we're going to call halt to it, and we're both going to go away, take some time out, think about what the end outcome is we both want. Do we want one person to sort of win and the other person to lose, or do we want both people to feel that there's been mutual agreement? And even if you can't always necessarily agree with each other's ideas, at least you can respect that
Yes.
that you're allowed to have your own ideas, and maybe respect that you're going to just have some differences.
Yes. Well, it takes me back to our the beginning of our conversation about listening to little kids. And it feels like that to me is partly how our voices are heard, is even like right now with you and me listening to each other and seeing, like like we both have there's a podcast, and there's a reason why we're speaking, and we want to serve your listeners. But there's also a real conversation going on here, and it's from listening. To me, it feels like you're listening to me and I'm listening to you, and I want to hear you. I want to hear what you are saying. You want to hear what I'm saying. And that to me just feels so golden, that we bring our listening into the world, which then helps people express themselves, which helps them feel like they found their voice.
I really like that, because that brings to mind for me, during sort of the 1980s, 90s, there was a whole lot of talk about assertiveness training for women, and I feel like sometimes we stepped over the mark from being assertive about ourselves to being almost aggressive. And that, how do we step back from that while we are still very clear about what we want for ourselves?
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you said assertiveness training. I would say that in the 70s was my first personal growth workshop. And yes, assertiveness training. And it was at the local college community college. And I showed up and I loved it. I just went, oh, this is so neat to find the power to be more of myself. And uh, definitely there was the passive, which I felt like I was more passive. And then there was the aggressive. I'm definitely not aggressive, but still it felt like in between was all this wonderful playground of assertiveness. And some of the exercises we had to go practice. I mean, I was even afraid to take a garment back to the store and say, I need to exchange it, or, I need to return it. I have to tell you, that is true. And another example is I lived in the country, and I was driving every week and back to the city to go to these classes. And I had to, somebody always took a ride with me, always got a ride with me. But he smoked in my car. I couldn't tell him, no, I don't want you to smoke. Can you believe that? That I could not tell him to stop smoking and not smoke in my car. So that was one of my first challenges and exercises in assertiveness training to practice saying to him, don't smoke in my car.
I I think that's quite funny, and you say to me, "Can I believe that?" And the reason you say that is because you come across as a very clear, articulate, assertive woman who wouldn't be afraid of speaking up.
Mhm.
And I think people feel the same about me. They think, I speak up, I speak my mind, and yet I can relate to that fear
Yeah.
so much because that's exact. I wouldn't do it either, and on
Yeah.
so many levels, I still, that fear of
Uh-huh.
asking for what I want still
Yeah.
comes up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I really don't think Toastmasters gets to the place where we are going right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The ability to speak up in situations that are difficult and challenging for us, which is different than giving a speech or a presentation.
Mm. And so your work with people is to help them learn to do that in their own relationships with their partners and their children, but also in the workplace,
Yes.
in the wider world.
Yes, yes. And it, many of the people that I work with, of course, are doing it so they can be better presenters at work,
Yes. Yep.
for sure. But I have to tell you that there are a lot of people I work with who go, I never want to give a speech. That's not what I'm doing this for. And in fact, I just got an email from somebody who says, I'm good. I'm already great at public speaking. It's just when I get more vulnerable with people, I get anxious. Do you work with the being,
Mm.
not the doing? And I wrote back, I said, that's exactly what I do.
That's who I am.
Yes. Yeah, you found the right door here. Come.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think this work is just so essential, Doreen, because being able to communicate with each other is our lifeblood, being able to share our stories, share our goals and dreams, share our anxieties and fears. That's how we connect. And that's just essential to being a healthy whole person and having a fulfilled life.
Yeah. Yeah, again, my image of you with your hand on your heart a while ago, it just feels like being able to feel our hearts and feel the courage or the bravery inside of our gut, and to feel our feet on the ground, and to feel like there's a core strength down, down, down inside of us is what is a great guidance, I think.
So what about people who have some depression or anxiety and, what sort of challenges or how are these challenges increased for them and for very shy people? And, in the beginning you said about how shy you were, and I know I'm really shy, but in a one-on-one situation in my work, I'm very confident and I don't come across as shy. But, walk into a room, like you said, you walk into a room with 6 people and, a little squeak comes out of your throat and you can
Yeah.
hardly say hello.
uh, Yeah. Well, that's why a certain kind of training, which we don't get in school mostly, the training how to maintain what we have one-on-one,
Mm.
right? Like right now, you being able to, one of the exercises I do with people is like in front of the room when I used to train in person, yeah, is that you and I are speaking. The people in the room are behind me, but you and I are so connected, and you and I are speaking, and I step back about 5 feet. You and I are still speaking, and I step back a little bit further. You and I are still speaking, connecting to each other. You're still natural, comfortable, at ease. And then pretty soon I'm at the same distance as the audience is from you, and you are still so connected to me. And then I say, you're speaking in public.
Mm, mm, mm,
And, it's like, oh, is this what it is? To
mm,
be able to maintain a sense of myself and being with one person at a time in such a way, because that's familiar. I'm comfortable, just like I was very comfortable one-on-one in my office. And
mm.
that's one of the tricks, if you want to call it a trick or a technique or a tool, for people to realize that this kind of public speaking, even presentation type things, is when you really know how to connect one person at a time. That's what you do in a group.
Mm, mm. Interesting. And so what about if there feels like there's a difference in power level, So like, let's say you walk into the boss's office to talk about a problem at work or ask for a raise, and I hear, there's a lot of talk about wage disparity and things like that. And one of the things I hear about that is women are not very good at asking for pay increases and to be recognised for their contribution. And I think there is still a little bit of that sort of power play between positions as well. So how do we deal with that? How do we?
Well, again, psychology takes me back to if I'm working privately with somebody who has that issue, it's a little different than just giving a quick tip to people who are in that situation. But, the way you just described it, it's like somewhere along the line, authority, they learned that authority has more power than they are. Where did they learn that? Was it the father, the mother, the teacher, somewhere along the line? In some way they felt less than. So that I would probably, if I was working with somebody, want to go there first. And then another, totally, if we don't even go there, it's well, inside of this authority, whoever it might be, is a little person.
Mm,
Can you see that little person? Can you see a different, there are layers to human beings, and being, it's like you and I together right now, we're being human with each other. Obviously, neither of us has more authority, but it's like, even if you were an authority figure, I feel like I could look at you and see your beauty, your essence. And so that's been my work, is teaching people how to see the essence of others. And in doing that, when you go into an office, it's like, in terms of the relationship and feeling like somebody has more power than you, it's learning how to look at some other thing besides focusing on their status. And then, so that's a second thing. And then the third thing comes back to your own bravery and your own courage that, I was talking about, in your gut. Where is the truth, of what you know to be true and what you know to be fair? And that's in that middle ground that we were talking about with assertiveness,
mm,
right? You can assert yourself. And
mm,
that it feels so good to be able to move into a scary situation, and you're asserting.
mm.
You're not aggressing and you're not passive.
Yeah, and you're holding your own space.
Yes, I like that phrase, holding your own space. Yes.
I can feel that in here too.
Uh-huh.
That holding your own space.
But you have to go in, like you're saying, holding your own space, and you have to be your own space.
mm,
Does that make sense?
it does, and that comes back. I mean, our conversation is cycling around a little bit because that comes back to that clarity that you need, that being able to go deep down inside of yourself and being really clear in yourself about what you're needing and then what the outcome is that you're wanting to achieve with the conversation.
Yes, right. And engaging both listening to yourself is
Mm,
what would have to happen first, because then you go, oh yeah, I know what I need.
yeah.
And then it's moving into the conversation. It's exactly what I said before, tapping into, like, knowing where to tap into, learning how to do that. And then the going through the fear and finding the courage. And then it's the expressing and all the ways in which you need to reach somebody, and that's a whole learning. And then once you've expressed yourself or asked for the raise,
Yeah.
it's like, what do you do with what you get back?
Yeah.
And how do you maintain that sense of inner strength to take whatever comes?
And then deal with that. Yeah.
Yes. And then that's a whole nother kind of assertiveness.
And do you think that people need to think through those various scenarios and be clear in themselves about what they will do with the different situations? Or do you think they can evolve as you go along?
Well, I think life gives us opportunities to and challenges. So I think if those of us who are more committed to being more conscious, more aware that, and more seekers of, you might say, truth, that we really want to develop our potential, then if it feels like that the life gives us those challenges, and if we have tools, techniques, like journaling, or a coach, or
Yeah.
therapist who can help you discover, well, what is really going on here. And then, to me, that's to know thyself is the beginning of expressing yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I'd like to go down that rabbit hole a little bit in a moment. I just wanted to ask you about, I have a couple of different clients who are struggling to communicate their health needs and their nutritional needs to their various partners. So, one is expected to sit down at night and drink beer with her partner, and when she doesn't, and she says, "Look, I want to take, I'm trying to deal with some health issues. I won't go into them too much, but
Mm-hmm.
how does she deal with what she feels is the negativity about not sitting down and drinking beer? And then the other one is asking his wife, or his wife getting annoyed when he says, "I don't want to eat some of that food that you've cooked for me because I'm taking care of my health, and that food is not helping me improve my health." How do we deal with those kinds of situations?
Well, first, it's what we talked about before about having more of a creating a collaborative conversation where that's handled way before you get to that point where you're sitting down at the table, or that you're at the bar and you're supposed to order a beer. But it feels like that there's an understanding and agreement, what you're doing and why you're doing it, in the non in the situation where it's not happening, like outside of the alcohol or outside of the food. And it would be about first coming to an agreement about that, and then to be able to express whatever needs to be expressed. And then that's the whole, now we're moving into, well, what happens when you express yourself, and how do you deal with the consequences, and especially if they're negative. And um, it's part of it's being true to yourself and really knowing what truth is inside. And maybe if you're the coach, it's like trusting you to be the strength for them, and to help them be strong in those situations. And then I guess lastly comes up for me is the communicating when the person is being challenged for making those choices, it just feels like, okay, I know you don't understand. Like having empathy for the partner who wants them to eat their delicious food that they've prepared.
Mm, yeah, those are such good skills to develop. And again, I think comes back to what we talked about in the beginning about perhaps having some of those ideas available to you so that you're not having to think of them on the spot. Like you can go to them and you can go, and being able to maybe practice them in your own mind beforehand.
Yeah, visualize what you just are saying is seeing the situation and seeing yourself expressing, speaking up. Yes.
And then what's the worst thing that can happen if you do speak up? Because we're quite fearful of someone, because somebody else may use anger or sarcasm or some other way of imposing their will on us. And so what's the worst thing that can happen if we do speak up and we do hold that space and we are centered and hear about our needs?
Yeah, well, I think if we add to the conversation we're having is empathy for the other person who wants something different and being able to express that rather than like, this is what I want and you can't make me. It's more like, I can understand you really put so much energy into these great recipes and I really appreciate that. And I'm not going to be eating that. I just can't, so that I would say it's important to acknowledge the other person.
Because, just talking with you here, I suddenly had an insight into the fear that the other person has, because we get so engrossed in our own fears and needs and anxieties that we forget that maybe, we're standing up to someone we haven't, we're saying something we've never done. We might not have done this for 40 or 50 years, and then suddenly we're being different. And how fearful that looks for the other person.
Change right before their eyes.
What? And what they might be thinking is going to be the outcome of that change. Oh, you don't love me anymore, or you're going to leave me, or, so there may be some other fearful responses going on there.
We certainly have covered from like what is the fear of public speaking. But I think what we're telling people is that all speaking is public. Even, I don't know, I would say that even speaking to yourself, you're taking in some kind of message that came from probably the public in your life. Some public made you feel or think a certain way, parents or teachers.
Well, we broached that slightly in the beginning, and I think for all of us, we acknowledge that little inner critic that sits on our shoulder and tells us that we're not good enough, or we can't do it, or we're just too useless, or we failed, or just sits there. And that's someone else we have to speak up to.
Yes.
And,
yes,
sort of
our own bully.
Our own bully, like, go away, I'm not listening to you. It's not, that's not true. So you talked about journaling, and I think there are quite a few other techniques that we can use. We've got, we know that we can rewire our brains. We know that we can rewire pathways in our brains. And I think journaling is one way of doing that, and creating tiny steps and mindfulness and breathing. Would you share a little bit of that? Because I'm pretty sure you do a lot of that in your work with people.
Well, you mentioned journaling, and one technique I love is dialogue with parts of self. So that we just mentioned the bully, you could have a conversation, journal, you put, you start out with me, and then you go, hello, bully. And then bully, you put bully on the next line, and bully says, I'm going to control you. You can't make me go away. Then me, well, sounds like you're trying to be the big one there. What makes you think you've got all the answers, bully? Well, don't I? Haven't I always had the answers? You can't manage without me. So the whole idea of speaking and being that part, and it's called dialogue with parts, actually. And so that's a technique that I have found people really, especially if you do like dialogue with the child, it's called inner child work, but the little one that you abandoned in order to grow up, and the precious one that probably was made to not feel, like I said, confident and welcomed into this world, and you had to leave her behind too, or him. And so the dialogue would be, hello, little one. Or I have people, sometimes they give them names, like, like I'm Doreen, so my little one would be called Reenie. Hello, Reenie. And then Reenie says, well, you went off and got a PhD. Good for you. What about me?
I'm still sitting here needing
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Pay attention.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because there's also future self work you can do as well.
Yes.
You project yourself to the future, and then you become your own guide as to, okay, so what's the next step I need to take?
I love that. In fact, yesterday I had a session with somebody, and he just had the greatest phrases, and he wants to be, and I wasn't even like trying to facilitate this, but he said, I want to be the black belt of relaxation. So that you're talking about a future image. And so, well, how do we then, visualize and anchor in the sense of himself? What does that mean? So I had him close his eyes and to try and, embody what is that sensation. And he couldn't at first. So we just sat quietly a little bit longer. And then he put his hand back here on his neck, and he goes, oh, I feel a little relaxation here. And he didn't realize earlier he had talked to me about anxiety and how it grips him here. He said it was a vice grip. And so I pointed that out, and I said, so the vice grip loosened up, huh?
Just a little bit. Yeah.
So the black belt of relaxation. Can't wait till we get there together with him.
Oh, that's such a great projection into the future. What about overwhelm? We were talking a little bit about, people are feeling depressed. I'm not quite sure the right terminology around all that, anxious, and overwhelmed. And I'm just wondering how, talking to that, what did you call it? The dialogue, having that dialogue, how that could be used for people who feel overwhelmed, and they just feel like they've got so much external stuff piling in on them, and there's just no space for them to take care of themselves. Is there a way that dialogue could be useful in that situation?
I think the dialogue might be with the can't.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
And so tell me more about the I can't. I can't. And I'd want to hear more about what the pressure is around not taking time, because you could always take a full breath, and you don't have to take 20 minutes to meditate. You could always take one full deep breath, which is so cleansing, isn't it?
Well, I think about breathing because I kind of look at these things in terms of body chemistry. So what's going on with your body chemistry? What's going on with your neurotransmitters? What's going on with all your adrenal hormones?
Yeah.
And so one of the things about taking a deep breath is when we're in fear, when our neurotransmitters are overactivated and our adrenal hormones are overactivated, we're really just breathing up here because we're in our fight and flight response. And so if we can recognize that and take a deep breath, we immediately get out of that sympathetic drive. We immediately get out of fight and flight and we go into rest and digest. And that's where that sense of well-being, of calmness comes from it. So I think it's a wonderful technique for people to use to just calm everything down, let those hormones subside, and then let the body chemistry start to kick back in and do what it's supposed to be doing.
Oh, perfect. I love that. That feels like a good note as we begin to wrap up here. It's just what you just said applies to public speaking anxiety.
Absolutely.
And you're the scientist, and it feels like you just really showed people technically, what goes on with the hormones, and then the two different systems, the fight flight versus the other system, which is about, you said, rest and digest. Rest and digest.
Yeah. So important. And then of course I help people with bringing and making sure they have the nutrients to support all those functions. But where you come in is really helping to set the mindset and the stage and the connection with themselves and gaining that confidence, and I think the two work together, because without having a proper nutrient basis in your body, it's very difficult for your body to respond appropriately to things like stress. But then we also need to have the skills to know when we're in that situation and have those techniques to help us going forward with that. Would you like to, carry on.
Which is mindfulness.
Yeah, which is
you just described it. Yes.
So would you like to just tell people, where they can find you, how you work with them? But the world's opened up with Zoom, so now you can consult with people all around the world and you can help people everywhere. I think I put a friend of mine onto you the other day that, that I thought you may be able to help with some public speaking. So can you talk about, a little bit just about what you do, where people can find you, and we'll make sure we get all that info in the show notes for them.
Oh, thank you. Well, my website is essentialspeaking.com, essentialspeaking.com. And the reason why my work is called Essential Speaking is because it's all about tapping into, discovering, and claiming this essence that we've been talking about, and then learning how to stay in that no matter what the speaking situation happens to be. Whether it's like we were talking about walking into the office of the boss, or whether it's talking to your partner, or whether it's getting up on a stage, it's like we have to, and this is what I think you do too, is around how do we embody in such a way that we're more capable to be who we are. And to me, that's the essence of health. And so essentialspeaking.com. If people, I think that's probably the first step, but I have, my book is being launched this summer, The 7 Secrets to Essential Speaking, Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. So that's already on Amazon, actually. So people could find it there. And then you've been a guest on my podcast, so they could find you on my podcast, findyourvoicechangeyourlife.com, findyourvoicechangeyourlife.com.
Well, thank you for the absolutely wonderful work you do, Doreen. And every time I'm with you, and even over Zoom in your presence, I feel so much calmer, and so you just have a wonderful way about you that really helps. I think, well, I know it really helps me feel a lot more grounded, and I'm sure that a lot of other people will benefit from that as well.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.